Hi everyone, thank you for joining us here on this Monday, October 29th. I am very excited to be with Dr. Joan Mealy McCarthy, the Executive Director of the Summit School. October is Dyslexia Awareness Month, and as a parent of elementary school children, when I began to research based on what you had sent me, I was surprised that I was very ignorant about dyslexia, and it is the most common learning disability, and this is something we definitely need to be aware of, so I'm appreciative that you've brought this to my attention, and that's what we are here. If you have any questions, if you are joining us, feel free to comment. My editor, Ann, is right behind the camera, and she will let us know if you have a question, and we will try and answer it. And this is just a really great resource to have, and we just, again, thank you for joining us, and thank you, Dr. McCarthy. I am just very happy to be here and very excited to just learn more about dyslexia and the research that you have done on it. So if we just want to jump right in, like I said, we're doing a Q&A, so if you have questions, I have some questions as well that I've prepared, and I just kind of want to jump off, if you don't mind, in the beginning, and what is dyslexia and what are some of the common misconceptions about it?
That's a great first question. So dyslexia is a disorder of reading, but it also has its basis in oral language. It's neurobiological in origin, which means that it's brain-based. We have very strong scientific information data that tells us that the left side of the brain, where the language centers are the parts of the brain that are wired differently and work differently for people who have dyslexia. And that when we want to read, it works on these language centers, that we are not hardwired to read. We are hardwired to use language, but not to read or to spell or to write. And so what happens is, as we have evolved through the millions of years, reading is something that's superimposed on the language centers. So we do know that it's neurobiological, we do know that it's language-based, we do know that it's part of the neurological makeup of an individual, and the other thing that we know is it's very hereditary.
Interesting. So it runs in families?
It runs in the families. So when mom or dad have dyslexia, there's about a 50% chance that children can have it. Boys and girls are affected almost equally, but boys might be more obvious than girls, or might be more significantly affected than girls. But the bottom line is, it's in the family.
Very interesting. And already here we are 2 minutes into this, and I've learned, so it's more of a reading based and not necessarily the writing, that they're hand in hand. As someone who, like I said, have been ignorant, miswriting or reading things backwards or writing things backwards, that was my misconception.
So people think that dyslexia is seeing words backwards, seeing letters backwards, spelling words backwards. It's not a visual disorder. It has its roots in oral language, the processing of sounds. So each word is made up of sounds, and we sequence those sounds. And each sound has a little swath, a bundle of acoustic features that people who have really intact abilities in their brain can figure out what those features are and assign it to a sound, and then assign it to a symbol. But people, it's amazing that we all can read. So what happens is, when you have dyslexia, this sequence of events and this confluence of information that has to be organized and coordinated doesn't necessarily happen. And so it's not seeing letters backwards. That may happen, and developmentally, all children write B's and D's backwards, but by the age of about 7, they start to disappear. In children with dyslexia, that does continue, but that's not the root of dyslexia.
And it doesn't, you could have read to your child in infancy up through, and that because it's a brain hardwired, that no matter how much or how little exposure you have to reading in your family, then it's the same playing field.
I'm going to say yes, I'm going to qualify that.
Okay.
So reading to children from infancy is always important. And I truly believe that you can mitigate the effects of dyslexia when you read to children and early on help them understand letters and sounds and words and rhyming. When children don't have that benefit, and then they get to school, they're so far behind the 8 ball because they don't know enough about the structure of language to then bring it to reading.
And the auditory and the vocal and, okay.
Right, exactly. So what happens is when children who are in households with low stimulation, without a lot of books, with low print stimulation, and children who are in poverty, they come to the reading table without all the information that children have who have been read to, have a lot of language. And then, if their brain is hardwired, that resembles dyslexia, they're at an additional disadvantage.
Okay.
So the reading is very helpful, but reading to your child will not cure dyslexia if your child is so inclined because of their hereditary.
Okay. Interesting. What are some of the common signs? Oh, I think we have a question.
We do. Kelly would like to know at what age a parent can start to notice dyslexia.
I love that question. Okay,
Thank you,
and I'll
Kelly.
tell you why I love that question, because a lot of times parents are told that you can't test for dyslexia until a child is in 3rd grade. That's pretty far from the truth. So there are certain oral language symptoms or behaviors that you can see in children, and couple that with a family history of difficulty in school, difficulty with reading, you can start to figure it out. So for example, if children are late talkers, or if they can't seem to become intelligible by the age of 3, if they really struggle with rhyming and don't love rhyming books, if they seem to struggle with word retrieval, in other words, telling you exact words for things and maybe just kind of describe around the word, difficulties formulating, and even difficulty with correct grammar and syntax up to the age 5. So by age 5, their sentence structure should be pretty good, should be pretty adult-like. But when children really still struggle with that syntax and grammar structure, then you really need to say, is my child going to have difficulty with reading? And if so, look to the family. Dad struggled, or grandma struggled, or grandpa struggled. And so you can start to put it together and start evaluating children that early, and start working with children on the oral language level. Sounds, sound sequencing, rhyming, color naming, and just a little bit of personal information. I've got 4 grandbabies, and one of them has, I think, might be my baby who's going to struggle with reading.
Okay.
So all of the others were articulate and spoke and knew color names by like 18 months. And I'm not a big fan of color names at 18 months, but this other one, she gibberish, she couldn't make herself understood well. Grammy got in there because I'm a speech pathologist. So she's really now come a long way after a few months, but I'm watching her carefully.
Okay.
And her dad struggled with reading when he was a young guy.
Interesting.
So I'm right there,
Yeah.
looking at the preschool years, being prepared and giving her as much information and as much help as I can so that when she gets to the reading table, she won't struggle.
That's wonderful, and that isn't a sign that she doesn't want to learn. So when they have problems, I believe I read that it's not an indication that they don't have young children, they want to absorb everything, and so that reluctance doesn't have anything to do with her ability to learn, correct?
Excellent.
And it just is a sign, a common sign of what to look for or to be aware of.
That's another really good point.
Dyslexia.
So let me give you an example. So if you were to put me on a tennis court right now, I would be very reluctant to accept your invitation because I can't play tennis.
I
Right?
love tennis. It
So,
would be
but
fun.
not so much for me. But if you put a child in a situation where you're reading books and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, or you're trying to get them to rhyme and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, or they're in class and the teacher is trying to get them to understand the sounds of that letters make and sequence those sounds, and they can't do it, or writing words and they can't do it, I ask you, how interested or how willing will many children be to engage in something that's so inherently difficult and makes them feel so incompetent?
Especially in a group setting,
Exactly.
as a classroom,
So they might become the class clown. They might retreat. They might sit back. They might cry. They might come home and tell you they don't like school, or maybe they have a lot of stomach aches and don't want to go to school. So it's not an issue of motivation. It's an issue of, can that child feel competent and confident in that learning situation?
What are the steps to make them competent and confident then? Can we kind of discuss on, is it schooling, tutoring, what can parents do? What are the resources that they can access to?
That's a good
Start.
question. I'm gonna get to that question
Okay.
in a roundabout way.
Okay.
So first, we're gonna say if a parent feels that their child is struggling, even in preschool, a lot of our guys, the parents will say, "I knew it" when they were in preschool, and a lot of times their teachers say, "Oh, he's fine. He's a boy. Oh, he's got a late birthday. Oh, it doesn't. You're fine. He's reading just where he needs to be reading," and you know, compared to other children you see, and compared to your other children, that this child is not. So, to parents, whatever's in your gut is usually correct. Don't let anybody tell you that you're a helicopter mom. Don't let anybody tell you, "Oh, mama, sit down and relax." I'm asking you not to be a helicopter mom, but I am saying if you feel that something is just not right, act on it. Ask questions.
Who
And
are you asking the teachers? Are you asking your pediatrician?
ask teachers, ask a pediatrician. If you're not getting answers, then seek help yourself. You might need to go for an evaluation. If it's a preschool child, you would want to go to a speech-language pathologist who really understands the link between oral language and reading. If your child is in kindergarten and first grade, of course you can go to a speech pathologist, but educational diagnosticians, clinical psychologists who have an expertise in this area can help you. If you're in the public schools, you can also ask your child be evaluated.
Okay.
And if you're told, "Well, we're not ready," or "We don't think there's reason to," don't stop there.
Okay.
Then go for a private evaluation yourselves, and then bring it to the school and share with the school. The bottom line is we have to identify children early. And the earlier we identify children, the easier it will be for them to learn how to read. This wait to fail model that has been in existence for years and years doesn't work for children. The key time to work with kids is in preschool, kindergarten, first grade, second grade. Get it in early so they can get their confidence. That being said, if you don't find a child till 4th, 5th grade, it doesn't mean that there's no hope.
No,
There is.
that's good.
But the earlier you get a child understood, evaluated, and then worked with, the better off it's going to be. So it could be tutoring. Okay. It could be you find a different school placement that works better for your child. It just depends on the child, and hopefully the person who's evaluating and working with you to really figure out who your child is going to be the one to really give you that information as to next steps.
That's great. Okay. You mentioned older children. That once the 4th, 5th grade. There's a term that's in this paperwork that's late emerging reading disorder. Is that a similar thing to dyslexia? Is it something that is a cousin of it?
It's a very good question. So sometimes children who have such good language skills can predict and figure out what's going on in print based upon the pictures or based upon the context. But around 4th, 5th, 6th grades, when the vocabulary in print gets much more difficult, much more multisyllable, the sentence structure gets much more sophisticated, all of a sudden they show up with difficulties with reading. And so then it becomes important to understand, is the difficulty because the child can't decode or sound out the words, which is the master indicator of dyslexia, or is it that they can read all the words and can't comprehend? That's not dyslexia. So dyslexia is that word level actually having difficulty sounding out the words. But then you have the other pieces. You have the spelling that goes with it. You have the oral language word retrieval, maybe saying syllables in your oral language. There's other components. But at the 4th or 5th grade, sometimes all of a sudden kids start to struggle, and then you have to figure out, is it decoding, is it comprehension, or maybe is it both?
Okay. I have a personal question actually that just actually I just lost it. With reading, and you're talking about word retrieval, and with the school system, no matter what school your child goes to, the curriculum, this goes into math. I know that my children, their math problems many of them are word problems.
Exactly.
So by having a disability in reading, it really can affect all subject areas, not just, here we are in this lovely library, tons of books, but yet, so that puts them at a disadvantage as well, correct?
Exactly. So when children have dyslexia, they have to read, right? And if they have dyslexia, they struggle with reading. And so it's not only in reading class, it's in math class, it's in science class, it's in social studies class,
Okay.
and it's across the board. And then it's not just reading, as we talked about before, it's spelling. You can't spell what you can't read, right? So that's a piece. And then if you can't spell, you try to put something on paper, and you know that what you can put on paper is way less sophisticated than what you can say, is very frustrating for children. Yeah, so dyslexia affects the whole gamut of academics.
Just like in making schooling hard, and again, it goes back to what you had said about they'll either retreat or they will just, I don't want to do this, it's not fun, or this is not interest to me. Are there methods that you can, for teaching a child with dyslexia that are different than teaching someone who doesn't have dyslexia, especially in like a classroom setting? If a teacher, do all dyslexia students need one-on-one intervention, or?
The answer to that is no.
Okay.
So for beginning reading, what's good for children with dyslexia is good for all kids. The term that's being used now is structured literacy, which talks about the fact that children need to learn phonics explicitly in a systematic way.
Okay.
And so if we start that way in kindergarten and go through kindergarten, second grade, third grade, the children who have a mild affect of dyslexia, chances are they are going to pick up reading and do fine.
Okay.
The children who are more significantly affected might need some more, or will need some more intensive work. But this systematic explicit phonics is really the way to help all children to learn how to read, decode.
Okay.
Comprehension, it's not to say that you don't work with comprehension, you do. But if you want kids to figure out words, it's got to be systematic, explicit phonics, and the research is very strong to support it.
I feel this is such a nice big circle going back to getting your child tested, or the speech pathologist, or talking with the school. Because here we are at the Summit School, so you are a school that is for people with learning disabilities, correct? That is,
we like to say learning
differences. My apologies, learning differences.
That's okay.
And so if your child has dyslexia, they may not necessarily need to be here in this school. They could still thrive and function in their current school. So how do you know that I guess what the full circle is, by going to the pediatrician, by going to the resources and getting your child tested, that is what ultimately helps a parent decide the right course for their child.
Many children will function beautifully in a more mainstream environment with the appropriate kind of help.
Okay.
Whether it's after school tutoring, or for children who qualify for special education services in the schools, as long as the services are implemented according to what the research says, that matches with the child's profile, and happens in a way where not only do they get the services, but it's integrated throughout the day, the child will do well, which is really important. But there are some children for whom it doesn't work. For those children who still struggle with reading, they struggle with working memory, their ability to hold on to verbal information, their ability to work quickly. Some children have very slow processing speed, and the speed with which they're taught in a mainstream classroom is just too fast for them, and they struggle. It could be what we call executive functions, where they have trouble managing all of the information, managing the events that happen in their day, and then of course it's how can they produce all of the work that's required of them in the classroom if they can't read, they can't write, they can't work quickly, and they don't remember things easily.
Right.
So typical mainstream school for children can be this blur. It's like you're a horse and buggy on the Beltway, and everybody else is a Porsche, right? And you're just plodding along, and everybody's whizzing by you, and the information becomes a war. And so there are children who perceive school that way. And for those children who can learn, who are bright, very cognitive, but have those processing difficulties, schools like the Summit really helps them.
Great. And because dyslexia is not something you outgrow, correct?
Yeah.
It is not something that will go away. It's
Right.
not a disease. It is something that is
It's not a death knell either.
No, exactly. But it is something that they will have and can cope and become wonderfully successful adults.
Absolutely. It's lifelong. It's the way the brain is hardwired.
Mm-hmm.
With early intervention, children can learn how to read, they can learn how to spell, they can learn how to write, they can learn what their learning style is and how to self-advocate for the kinds of things they need. Technology is huge
Mm-hmm.
for kids with dyslexia and for adults
Mm-hmm.
with dyslexia. And so it does not stop you from being who you want to be. I mean, we have graduates now, we're 30 years old, this is our 30th year, and so we have people who are doctors, physicists, cancer researchers, speech pathologists, teachers. We have people who are actors, photographers.
That's wonderful.
Right?
Yes.
It hasn't stopped them. And in
Mhm.
fact, they say it's the confidence and the skills that they gained
Mm-hmm.
here
That's wonderful.
that has kept them on the track and allowed them to become
Mm-hmm.
who they wanted to be.
Wonderful. Well, that leads perfectly into what are some good resources? How does one even start their research? Whether it's coming from their gut feeling about their child, whether they're like me, and when you sent me some information, I just enjoyed knowing more and learning more about it. Where can they begin? Where can someone
So
start?
there's three that I would like to send people to initially. The first one is the International Dyslexia Association.
Okay.
Has a wonderful website with very, very good information for teachers and parents.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fabulous. The other website I want to send you to is the Dyslexia Foundation, and it's yesread.org.
Yes.
And on the website, if you go to events and publications, you will find your way to 1-hour video clips of top researchers giving the latest brain research, the latest intervention research, the latest research about what to do with dyslexia in the
Mhm.
classroom. It's just a fabulous, fabulous resource, and I highly recommend it.
Okay.
Another one is understood.org,
Understood.
which is a
Okay.
very parent-friendly resource.
Mhm.
So those are three to start.
Okay.
Reading Rockets is also another lovely website for activities and
Mhm.
understanding
good
reading.
activities.
Mhm.
Those ways.
Yeah, so those are my top.
Great. We'll put them in the
Picks.
comments so that you can directly access them from the Facebook page. So we'll make sure to get
Yeah.
those out there. And I don't have any other questions. Is there anything that you would like to just as a an end to this wonderful discussion that we have? Like I said earlier, I've already learned so much in these last 20 minutes. Is there any parting words you would like to say to our readers?
Just that, as parents, we know your children. Don't be afraid to ask the questions to get the answers, because the answers will help you help your child. And this is what I tell parents all the time. When my children were growing up, I never wanted to be at the stage when they graduated high school saying, I woulda, shoulda, coulda.
It's very good advice.
So
Very
I
good.
always wanted to make sure that I knew what they needed and then provided what they needed to the best of my abilities.
Mhm.
And as parents, that's what you can do best for your
Okay.
kids.
Wonderful. We'll definitely take that to heart. And if anyone has any questions, even after the fact, then please put them in the comments. I will pass them along to Dr. Mealy McCarthy, and hopefully we can get that answer straight to your inbox. So again, thank you so much for
Oh,
having
thank you for
me.
having
I have
me.
so
Thank
enjoyed
you.
this,
Appreciate
and
it.
just want to say thank you all for joining us, and hopefully we'll be able to do this again sometime.
Anytime. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.